What you just heard was a recreation of a radio transmission from security guard Pier Zanfretta on December 6, 1978. Then, the radio went silent. The government later documented Pierre's encounter with giants. Here's my husband Damon with the details.
That radio transmission was terrifying, and then the silence was even worse. Well, the dispatch tried radioing Pierre back, but there was nothing. The radio had just gone completely silent. By now, the other security guards were racing toward the villa where Pierre had made his final transmission, and as they searched in the darkness, one thought kept racing through their minds. What in the world could terrify an experienced security guard so badly that he would abandon the safety of his patrol car and then disappear into the night? Well, just then, someone spotted him. Pierre was lying on the ground, face down, seemingly unconscious, but his body was shaking uncontrollably. And although this was a cold December night, he felt strangely hot to the touch. Well, when he finally came to, he was barely able to speak, but he did manage to squeeze out a few unbelievable words. He said that, now, check this out. He said that he had come face to face with towering creatures, nearly 10 feet tall, creatures that, according to Pierre, were not human. Ramblings of a security guard gone mad, maybe? Well, the Italian government didn't think so. No, they took this case seriously enough to keep everything extremely well documented. Information that came in from police officers, military investigators, and even medical doctors. So, what exactly had happened to Pier Zanfretta? And why was this case taken so seriously? Pierre was just this average guy, living this ordinary life. But on the night of December 6, 1978, Pierre's ordinary life would change forever.
Welcome to Velarcana. Here, we share mysteries that often defy explanation. I research the cases, and my husband tells the stories.
It was close to midnight when Pierre drove into the small village of Marzano, high in the hills above Genoa, Italy. The night was cold, and the sky was clear. And although there were scattered homes throughout the area, much of the surrounding countryside was dark and isolated. Well, Pierre was making his usual patrol. One of the properties on his route was a large country home known as Villa Casa Nostra. The house belonged to a dentist from Genoa, and because it was vacant much of the year, Pierre's security company had been hired to check on it during the night, and he had made this stop before, so there was no reason to expect anything unusual. He would drive up to the property, make sure that everything was secure, record the visit, and then continue with his patrol. At least, that's the way he had planned it. That's the way it usually went. But as Pierre approached Casa Nostra this time, his patrol car suddenly began to sputter. Then the headlights went out, and the engine died, leaving Pierre alone inside of a dark car in front of his house on an isolated country road. Well, Pierre tried to contact the operations center and report the breakdown, but the radio wasn't working either. Nothing but silence, and that was strange. See, the car and the radio operated on separate electrical systems for situations just like this. One could fail without affecting the other, but somehow, tonight, they had both stopped working at exactly the same time. Well, Pierre looked toward the home, and that's when he saw them. 4 small lights moving across the lawn behind the house. Obviously flashlights. These were burglars, and Pierre was a security guard, and this was exactly the kind of situation that he had been hired to handle. So he got out of his car, took his gun and flashlight, and moved toward the house. He could see the 4 lights moving through the darkness near the back of the property, looking as if several people were searching for something. If he moved quietly enough, he just might be able to sneak up on them and then take them by surprise. Well, he walked up to the property, went through the gate, and was moving toward the corner of the house when out of nowhere someone struck him from behind. Well, he spun around fast, gun raised, flashlight on, ready to confront whoever had attacked him. But standing just a few inches away was something that Pierre could not understand. Well, from that moment on, everything moved in slow motion. He saw the chest first. It was towering above him, so he raised the flashlight higher and higher, finally illuminating its head. This thing, whatever it was massive, monstrous, at least 10 feet tall, and it was not human. Well, for just a moment, Pierre just stood there, dumbfounded, terrified, his gun pointing toward this thing, his flashlight trembling in his hand. But he couldn't move. No, his mind just could not process what he was seeing. Well, a moment later, he dropped his flashlight and he took off in a dead run away from the villa, trying to reach his patrol car. But before he made it back, the darkness behind him was suddenly swallowed up by this intensely brilliant light. For just an instant, it felt as if it were daylight, as this brilliant light flooded the entire property. Well, Pierre spun around, and he saw something enormous rising from behind the house. It was wide, flat, and shaped like a triangle, larger than the villa itself. The light coming from it was so powerful that Pierre had to raise his arms to protect his eyes, and the air around him became intensely warm. The object was making this loud hissing or whistling sound as it rose into the sky. Well, somehow the electrical system inside of Pierre's car began working again. The radio came back to life, and shortly after midnight, the operator at the command center heard Pierre's voice coming through the speaker. He was frantic, shouting things that didn't make any sense at all. Well, the radio operator, a man named Carlo Toccolini, thought that Pierre was being attacked, maybe by some wild animal or something.
They're not human! They're not human! Help!
An instant later, the connection was lost. Well, Toccolini tried calling back, but there was nothing. So he immediately alerted his supervisor, and other security guards were ordered to stop what they were doing and drive to Pierre's location to assist him. But when they got there, his patrol car was empty, and he was missing. So they searched the area. And nearly an hour after the radio transmission, the guards spotted someone lying face down. It was Pierre. And when he finally came to, he sprang to his feet, and now this is weird. At first, he didn't recognize his co-workers. No, he aimed his gun at them, and he told them all to get back. Well, they told him to lower his weapon, but he didn't comply. In the end, the guards had to rush him, force the gun from his hand, and then physically restrain him. And the entire time, now get this, Pierre kept repeating with this empty expression on his face, "I saw them. I saw them." Pierre insisted that he had encountered some enormous creatures, and then he saw this bright light in the sky, as bright as the sun. But by the time that the other security officers had arrived, all was quiet. Pierre couldn't account for the missing hour between his radio call and the moment that they found him laying face down on the ground. So what? You saw this giant walking around and then a second sun rising out of the sky? And you can't remember anything after that until we found you lying face down in the grass? Come on, give me a break. This all sounded like a bunch of BS to them. It was interesting, though, that even though it was a cold December night, Pierre's clothing was extremely warm to the touch, and he appeared extremely genuine in his conversation. Well, at this point, no one really had any idea of what to make of this thing. But less than 3 weeks later, Pier Zanfretta would suffer another terrifying ordeal, and this time, there would be evidence. On December 27, 1978, just 20 days later, it happened again. Pierre started work at 10 p.m., and for the first hour and a half, everything was normal. The weather, however, was terrible. Heavy rain poured across the mountains. The temperature hovered just above freezing, and a thick fog had settled over the roads. It was the kind of fog that swallows headlights, hides the road ahead, and makes even the most familiar mountain routes seem eerily dangerous. Pierre, however, was confident. He had driven these roads countless times before. He knew the sharp turns, the narrow passages, and the steep ravines hidden just below the pavement. And despite what had happened at Casa Nostra less than 3 weeks earlier, Pierre had just about convinced himself that his life had returned to normal. Unfortunately for Pierre, it hadn't. At exactly 11:46 p.m., the operator at the command center received another frantic call from Pierre.
I'm surrounded by a thick fog. I can't see anything anymore.
Then Pierre said something that made absolutely no sense at all.
The car is driving itself. The brakes aren't working. It's picking up speed. And it's making turns all on its own. I don't know what to do.
Making turns all on its own? Well, the operator asked him to repeat the transmission, but there was only silence. Then, 4 minutes later, at 11:50 p.m., Pierre called again. This time, things got even stranger. The panic was gone, and his voice was now strangely calm and compliant.
The car stopped, and there's a bright light. I'm gonna get out now.
The operator tried to stop him. No, don't get out of the car. But it was too late. Pierre got out and left the radio behind. All was silent again. And for a second time, several men were sent out to look for Pierre. But there was no sign of the car, no sign of Pierre, only darkness, fog, and the growing fear that this time they just might not find him alive, because all along those roads were deep ravines. One wrong move in the darkness, and Pierre could have fallen hundreds of feet to his death. Well, after searching for nearly an hour, a couple of guards finally saw the car's headlights cutting through the fog. As they approached, their car died. No lights, no engine. Well, they got out into the pouring rain and then walked over to Pierre's car. And when they did, they saw that, now, check this out, steam was coming off of the top of his car. And when they touched it, they discovered that it was searing hot, which of course didn't make any sense at all. The weather was freezing, and it was raining. But Pierre was nowhere in sight, so they started calling for him. And just as they were about to walk out into the woods and look for him, one of them spotted him running away from the search party, screaming. One of the guards later said that he looked like a wild animal, terrified and desperately trying to escape. Well, the men chased him through the rain, caught him, and then restrained him, and they tried to make him understand that he was safe. But Pierre was trembling and crying.
Does anyone want to take me away? What will happen to my children? I don't want to go. I don't want to go.
Now, obviously, this whole thing was extremely bizarre. But to make matters even worse, just like with the car, Pierre himself was extremely warm. So much so that his ears were bright red. And even though it was raining, he was completely dry. Then, one of the guards noticed a set of shoe prints in the mud. But these shoe prints were enormous, more than twice the size of a normal human's shoe print. Here is an actual photo that was taken during this event. You can see just how perfect the outline of the shoe was. That is definitely one strange photograph. It looks fake, but it was reported to have actually been taken at the site. Well, a couple of the guards helped Pierre into the car, and then the men manually turned it around, gave it a little push, and let it roll down the hill. And right then, Pierre spoke in this almost apathetic tone.
They're still here. Right now. Right outside.
And for just a moment, everyone sat in silence as the car slowly rolled down the hill. And then, just like in a horror movie, the lights suddenly came back on and the car engine restarted. Well, the men shook it off and then drove Pierre to a late-night spot to get him a cup of coffee and hopefully help him snap out of this. And once he calmed down, he appeared confused by all of the attention. He said that he could not remember what had happened, and he also didn't understand why so many men had been out searching for him. Well, shortly after this, they discovered a couple of strange things. First, 6 rounds were missing from Pierre's revolver. 6 shots had apparently been fired, but Pierre had no memory of when, where, or why he might have pulled the trigger. And then there was the car. After they drove it to the garage, the mechanic said that the roof was still hot, and the guard who drove it back said that the entire way he felt as if he were riding inside of an oven. Well, eventually Pierre did start to remember some of what had happened. He said that once the car stopped, he saw this intense bright light in the fog, and then something inside of him made him feel like everything was okay, and then it compelled him to get out of the car and walk toward the light. What happened after that remained confused, fragmented. There were flashes of those giants. Pierre remembered feeling fear. He remembered heat. But it was all such a jumble. Now, at this point, you may be thinking that all of this sounds just a little too fantastical. Don't worry, if that's what you're thinking, I did too. But you guys know Amy. She dug all through this case. Many people have reported on it. But Amy, well, she found the official government transcripts detailing the very facts that I'm giving to you now. When Amy digs into these cases, she really does get information from all over. Witness statements, court records, books, hypnosis sessions, and from many other sources. But every once in a while, she'll stumble upon more official documents. And that's what happened here. Long before this case ever became famous, the Italian authorities documented exactly what had happened. On December 7, 1978, the same morning that Pierre was found outside of Casa Nostra, the owner of the security company reported the incident to the local Carabinieri. That's the National Military Police Force in Italy. And Brigadier Antonio Nucchi began investigating immediately. He went to Casa Nostra and he examined the property himself, questioning everyone involved. Then on the lawn beside the villa, he found something unusual, a large horse-shaped impression pressed into the grass. It measured approximately 6 feet across, and it extended roughly 9 feet in length. Then, on December 8th, a teletype was transmitted through official government channels. And get this, copies were sent to the Ministry of the Interior in Rome, the General Staff of the Italian Air Force, the General Command of the Carabinieri, the military commands in Turin and Milan, the Prefecture of Genoa, and the police and Carabinieri offices all throughout the region. To me, that sounds just a bit excessive if there was absolutely nothing to this case, right? Less than 2 days after an ordinary security guard makes an outlandish claim about giants, his account was being circulated through multiple levels of the Italian government and military. And at the end of the report, Pier Zanfretta was deemed as a reliable witness. Then came the second encounter, and once again, reports were sent through many of the same government channels. Then, on January 3rd, 1979, Brigadier Nucchi prepared a longer report covering both encounters. Then there were the other sightings. Nucci wrote that unusual, extremely bright objects had been reported by more than 50 people all throughout the area during the time period surrounding Pierre's encounters. And unfortunately for Pierre, those first 2 nights were only the beginning. Over the next 2 years, he would report even more encounters. The giants would return. The story would become even stranger, and Pierre would eventually be given something that would prove that these giants actually do exist. The first two encounters that Pier Zanfretta went through left him filled with anxiety because he still could not clearly remember what had happened during those missing hours. But he did remember the fear, the heat, the giants. So, in an attempt to understand what had happened, like with so many other cases of this type, Pierre agreed to undergo hypnosis. During those sessions, Pierre gave much better details of those giants. They had deeply wrinkled green skin, triangular-shaped yellow eyes, pointed ears, red veins across their heads, and, now I thought this was strange, mouths that appeared to be made of metal. Pierre said that they were called the Dargos, and that they came from a place called Titania, somewhere within what they described as the third galaxy, whatever that means. He also said that these creatures put some sort of a metal helmet on his head for some reason that he wasn't exactly clear about. And they also said that they would be back. Well, many people accuse Pierre of lying. Others believe that he was mentally ill. And some critics said that if Pierre truly believed his own story, then he should agree to be questioned under sodium pentothal, what's commonly known as true serum. So, now, check this out. Pierre did agree to answer questions under sodium pentothal. And on February 6, 1979, he signed a document stating that he was voluntarily submitting to a clinical examination at his own risk. And under the influence of this drug, Pierre repeated the exact same story. Giant beings, the Dargos, Titania, all of it. If nothing else, Pierre believed that it was all true. Insane story, isn't it? Quick side note, if you're new here, this is all we do. Share stories of the unexplained in this no-nonsense fashion. If you want to hear more stories like this, go to our channel page on YouTube. We have tons of reportedly true stories, just like this one. Back to this case. In July of 1979, Pierre reported a third encounter. This time, he was patrolling the suburbs of Genoa on a scooter when this green beam of light surrounded him. It lifted him and the scooter into a dark cloud and then into this hidden craft inside. During this abduction, Pierre said that the aliens told him that they would be abducting him one more time, and in that fourth and final abduction, they were going to give him something that would prove their existence. They told him that he was to deliver this proof to the famous American astronomer and UFO researcher J. Allen Hynek. And sure enough, on the night of December 2nd, 1979, Pierre disappeared for a fourth time. And this time, his co-workers witnessed two powerful beams of light shining down from inside of a dark cloud in the sky. Captain Casaba later said that at one instance, the beams appeared to be pointing directly at the search party, and then they disappeared and the cloud slowly moved away. Local farmers later said that they too had seen a large light moving above their homes in the night sky. Pierre was eventually located, and under hypnosis, he said that before the alleged encounter, he had seen a normal-sized man standing near a gas station. I thought this was extremely interesting. This man had an egg-shaped head and wore a checkered suit with what looked like a metal turtleneck. That made me think of what he had said about the aliens' mouths being made of metal, and I wondered if there might be some sort of a connection. Pierre said that this man's hands remained inside of his pockets and his face stayed hidden in the shadows. He also said that this almost human figure served as some type of a magnet, drawing him toward the giants. Pierre claimed that during this abduction, the giants had given him an object unlike anything made by humans. It was a crystal-like sphere containing a golden pyramid. He said that the pyramid had these foreign symbols on it, and it produced electrical discharges, and on the bottom was a hexagon containing 12 marked buttons. Now, this sphere should have settled everything, right? Proof from another world. Unfortunately, this artifact never made it to J. Allen Hynek. See, Pierre couldn't bring it to the United States. He said that it was just too dangerous to handle. So he hid it somewhere in the mountains. And then he wrote a letter to J. Allen Hynek asking him to come to Italy and take possession of it. Unfortunately, Hynek didn't go. Instead, he sent a colleague, Roberto Pinotti, to retrieve it, and since Pierre was instructed to give it directly to Hynek, he didn't trust Pinotti, so he didn't give it to him. He did, however, continue trying to convince Hynek to come and get it himself. Unfortunately, Hynek died before that happened, and Pierre never did reveal where he had hid it. Ironic, don't you think? The one object that just might have answered every question about this case became the greatest unanswered question of all. So, what really happened in those mountains in Italy? Did Pierre truly encounter giants from another world? Was he taken? Well, this case has no clear answers. And that promised proof? The mysterious sphere hidden somewhere up in the mountains? It never materialized. Pierre said that he would often visit the place where he had hid it, and he would marvel at it. But then in 2008, on Italian television, he claimed that he could no longer access the site for whatever reason. Then he died in 2024, and the sphere's fate remains a mystery.
Personally, I do believe Zanfretta encountered something. There's a final detail about this case I find fascinating. Years later, journalist Rino Di Stefano attended a UFO conference in Arizona, where he and Zanfretta were approached by two Americans connected to a UFO research organization. They claimed that two other spheres, similar to the one that Zanfretta said he was given, were already in existence. According to them, Zanfretta's was the missing third sphere. They wanted to bring all three spheres together, believing that by doing so, it would reveal a hidden message or possibly some revolutionary form of energy. They even traveled to Genoa and offered Zanfretta quite a bit of money if he would bring the sphere to the United States. But as Damon already shared, Zanfretta never produced it. Now, last week, we shared how we rescued a tiny kitten from the roof of an abandoned building. Hopefully, the new member of the family, and our new mascot, I guess, won't be as rude as Arcana was in this film. We would have refilmed that part, but we didn't have the time. How Arcana got into the studio? Well, that's actually the real mystery. And before we go, a quick update on our Buy Me a Coffee goals. We still need 23 more monthly Masters members. You want to help? Go to our Buy Me a Coffee page and sign up under the Masters level. If you can't do that, any help would be great. Your support goes directly to research, production, and storytelling. You know, the stuff that makes these videos possible. And honestly, we cannot do this without you. And however you support us, financial, or by watching or sharing our episodes, thank you. We truly count you as part of our family of truth seekers. And as always, stay curious.